It's time to hit the road. I'm Joseph, this is Input English. This channel provides intermediate content for comprehensible input. This is for English language learners who have quite a bit of English vocabulary. They can understand some things, but they need content that's a little slower, a little more deliberate, and precisely pronounced so that it's easier to follow. If you're new to comprehensible input as a way to learn languages, I have a lot of videos on that subject on this channel. Help yourself. Really, we're all in the same boat. Now, that's an expression in English for describing people who are in a similar situation. If I say we're in the same boat, it sounds like we're traveling in a boat. But no, when you say we're in the same boat, it seldom refers to travel. It almost always refers to people in a similar or analogous situation. On this channel, we're all in the same boat. We're all learning language. I'm learning Spanish, and I strive for a higher level of skill in that language. Viewers of this channel would be learning English with a similar aspiration to bring the level of listening comprehension and speaking ability to a higher level. We're all in the same boat. Today's topic is actually about travel. Right now it is spring. Spring is emerging. We've had our months of cold weather. In Northern California, we've had a lot of rain, a lot of wind, and these weather conditions I don't call bad weather. I don't consider weather good or bad, but clearly the conditions that we've had during this winter have not been very conducive to outdoor activities and a lot of the things I like to do. With the coming of spring, weather that is more conducive to activities is foreseeable. People do use the shorthand good weather or bad weather. I'm just being more precise. When it comes to travel, there are lots of things to talk about. Destinations, travel planning, style of travel. This is a huge topic, and I can't cover everything today. When we talk about travel in English, frequently we use expressions that are fairly specific to travel. A lot of these expressions are idioms. They come from metaphor, and they might be a little difficult to figure out if you try to translate them literally. I'm going to give you an example. I think this is in another video, but it bears repeating. The story comes from my wife. She was a college student quite a few years ago, and one of her friends, one of the other students at that university, had come over from Germany. His level of English was high enough that it was realistic that he come to the United States and live as a college student studying at that university. A group of friends went out to lunch and ordered their lunch at a restaurant. Each student placed their own order, and one of the students, when asked by the waitress what he wanted on his hamburger, he said, "The works." So when the waitress addressed the German speaker, he was still curious. He was still puzzling about what this expression was, "the works." So before he could place his order, he had to ask, "What is the works?" So the short answer is the works means everything, the full spectrum of things available. With respect to a hamburger, it would be each and every condiment that could be put on that burger. Now that could create some problems. Another place that you might hear somebody ordering something with the works might be a pizza all available toppings. And again, that might create some taste problems, and the person taking the order might question whether you really wanted anchovies and pineapple on the same pizza at the same time. So where did we get this term, the works? Well, it came from the Industrial Revolution. In the 1800s, a lot of machines were being made. Mechanisms were being assembled, and they were being assembled from parts. And so if someone gathered all the parts necessary to make something, to put together a machine, that would be the works. This is a clockwork. This is what is inside a mantle clock that allows the hands to go around and the chimes to strike and the hour to be stricken. So this is a clockwork, and all the parts in it, all the gears, levers, springs, pivots, bearings, all of that on cue. One of those clocks simply strikes the hour, and the other clock strikes the hour, but it also has chimes, and it plays a little song. The sounds you just heard were coming from mechanisms like this. In fact, the one clock that played the tune has a mechanism exactly like this, because this is a Seth Thomas 113 clockwork. So all of the parts here are the works. Over time, that expression from industry worked its way into everyday speech. So people now say the works, meaning everything. We have learned that if you study a language by memorizing lists of words, our memory retention and our ability to retrieve that information is very limited. Simply put, you cannot memorize the English language. It doesn't work. But you can learn things in context. And so that's why I tell stories, because the stories introduce expressions and vocabulary in context, and you can remember that if I am able to make an interesting story. If I make a boring story, you're going to start thinking about what you're going to do tomorrow or what you did yesterday. If your mind drifts away, there's no benefit. So I strive to make interesting content for you. I started this episode with the first expression, that is, hit the road. If you tell someone you hit the road, there's no hitting involved. It is that you take to the road or you begin travel, and it may not literally be a road. If you hit the road, you might be taking a flight. Beginning travel is to hit the road. To leave a place, you hit the road. Hit the road is also used as a disrespectful command to somebody you want to go away. You could look at somebody, this is very aggressive and not very kind, but you could look at someone and say, hit the road, Jack. Hit the road. Get out of here. Hit the road has many different uses and meanings. In this context, hit the road means beginning a travel. You might tell someone that you're going on a trip because you'd like a change of scenery. What that means is you'd like to see different things. Change of scenery is a metaphor referring to a desire to see or experience different things, something new. Some people travel to get away from it all. A lot of us have very busy, hectic lives. Our day-to-day is full of activities that we have to do, very hectic, perhaps stressful, perhaps fairly negative at sometimes. So if you're overwhelmed or burned out in your day-to-day, you may choose to travel to get away from it all. Get away from it all is an expression for travel to change your surroundings and get refreshed. Get away from hectic, difficult things. Now, when we travel, we have to take some things with us. You have some choices. Do you want to pack light or do you want to travel light? Now, that is our style. It has some advantages and disadvantages. If you travel light, then there are things you might want to have with you that you didn't bring. You might wind up buying something during your travel because you didn't pack it. Perhaps you need an extra sweater or a heavier jacket. That could be a problem if your planning was not good. In general, experienced travelers tend to pack light or travel light. I can remember years ago, I was traveling with my wife and a friend of ours. We were in the train station in Florence, and we were early, had plenty of time, and we knew what platform. We were just waiting for the time to come to board our train. As I was standing there, I saw a couple, an American couple, very heavily built, each of whom had several gigantic heavy suitcases. Each of them was struggling to move these gigantic pieces of luggage toward the train that they were trying to catch. They were also behind schedule, so they were hurrying. They identified the platform and went down next to the train, but the doors were closed. They were banging on the doors of the train, and of course the train did not respond to their knocking. The train did depart the station, leaving them on that platform. Their folly turned out to be a long list: bringing too much stuff, showing up late, and going to the wrong side of the train where the doors never open. They were on the wrong side of the train. Bless their heart. Bless their heart is a Southern expression when you're trying to be kind, but you're pointing out that you know about some flaws with that person. If someone does something really dreadful in the deep South in the United States, you might say, bless his heart. It doesn't mean approval. So if we have decided to take a trip, we need to decide where we're going to go. We pick out a destination, and then there comes into play what sort of activities or specific locations we might choose to visit on that trip. Perhaps we want to see a lot of typical tourist locations, the usual suspects. So the expression, the usual suspects, came out of Hollywood. That line was from Casablanca. Casablanca was a classic film from Hollywood starring Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman. Toward the end of the movie, as I recall, the chief policeman decided to round up the usual suspects. That expression is now in English. It's common, if you're at a location for the first time, to go to the typical tourist sites. If someone goes to Paris for the first time, it's fairly common for them to visit the Eiffel Tower. Perhaps they go up to the top, perhaps they don't. An alternative to seeing the usual tourist locations would be to go off the beaten path. Again, this expression comes as a metaphor. We know that if you have a field and people walk on that field, there is a tendency for the foot traffic to wear paths in the grass. And if you can see a footpath through grass, that is a beaten path. That is, the footfalls have beaten the vegetation down. That came into English. The beaten path is the usual path that people go. So if you're traveling and you're off the beaten path, you're not following the behavior of the other visitors. You're on your own. You're exploring further out. You might choose to take the scenic route. Now, this came up for us last year. We chose to drive to Texas to see the eclipse. There is a very satisfactory interstate highway that takes us directly to our destination, but it's not very scenic. It's just a freeway. There's not much to look at. And so we chose to go north and go through the canyons. And I added hundreds of miles and more than one day of travel to our trip because we took the scenic route. And on this trip, we saw beautiful sights on the scenic route. Now, sometimes when we travel, we are off the grid. So if you say you're off the grid, you're referring to the power grid. That is the electricity distribution system that allows you to plug devices into electricity. In the 21st century, if you're off the grid, that meaning has been expanded to being off the electrical grid, but perhaps also off of phone service and perhaps away from internet. So for me, if I say I'm off the grid, that means I have no cell signal, no power, and no internet. For me, that is not undesirable. Years ago, we pulled our travel trailer to western New Mexico to a location called the Cosmic Campground. They have a website if you're interested, Cosmic Campground. The Cosmic Campground was built by volunteers, by enthusiasts in that area. It was built with permission on land controlled by the U.S. Federal Bureau of Land Management. So this is federal lands, but it's not parklands, it's not national monuments, it is BLM land. And BLM land is not as tightly protected as would be a national park. You can do more things there. So they got permission to build concrete slabs for people to use setting up telescopes, because that area, the Cosmic Campground, is in a very dark sky location. There is almost no light pollution. So we pulled our travel trailer out there, parked it, and we were off the grid. No cell service, no internet, and no electricity to plug into. It was glorious. And the sky was super dark, except for all those stars. We saw more stars and galaxies and star clusters and nebulae than we had ever seen. It was spectacular. So being off the grid can actually be quite rewarding, but it can be a little bit of a shock if you're very used to being very connected with a lot of other people through technology. When I travel, I like to get up at the crack of dawn. There's an expression. The crack of dawn is where the sun is just peeking over the horizon. You get this picture of sunrise, the very instant of sunrise. So if you say, I'm getting up at the crack of dawn, you're simply telling someone that you are getting up super early, perhaps before daybreak. You could tell someone you want to get a flying start. That is, you want to get up and get on the road very quickly and make a lot of progress. A flying start suggests rapid progress in your travels. You can use that expression for any human endeavor. A party could get off to a flying start. That is, it becomes very boisterous and active right at the beginning. Now, depending upon the nature of our travel, we might be living out of a suitcase. If you're living out of a suitcase, all your day-to-day belongings reside in the suitcase, and your interaction with your belongings is in and out of the suitcase. This in contrast to what it would be like if you went to a destination and moved your belongings into pieces of furniture. For instance, you might rent an apartment in Paris for a month, and you might take all your clothing and put it in the dresser and put everything away, and during your visit staying in that apartment, your suitcase would actually be empty. When we travel, sometimes we're living out of a suitcase. When we travel in the travel trailer, we don't live out of a suitcase because we have drawers and closets in this travel trailer so that we're not living out of a suitcase. One of the decisions that people make is the style of their travel. Are they going to travel on a shoestring, perhaps? That expression means that they're traveling with flimsy support, with little support. It's a minimalist travel. If a student backpacks across Europe, staying in hostels or camping along the roadside, that is traveling on a shoestring. Now, the contrast to traveling on a shoestring might be traveling in style. If you tell someone you're traveling in style, that suggests luxury. So I have described two extremes: traveling on a shoestring, traveling in style. And what's this middle ground? It doesn't really have a name that I know of, but it's the way I like to travel. I like to travel in the Goldilocks zone. What's that mean? Okay. The children's story, Goldilocks and the Three Bears, you probably know that story. Goldilocks, the young girl, is in the house of the three bears, and the chair was too hard, too soft, but one of them was just right. The porridge was too hot, too cold, but one of them was just right. So if something is just right, in the middle of the extremes, we sometimes call that the Goldilocks zone. You will hear that expression from time to time. It's a very succinct and clever way of saying that you chose something that was just right. I try to be in the Goldilocks zone creating these videos. I don't want to create videos that are too slow and too simple because they might not capture your imagination and your attention. I also don't want videos that are too fast and too complex because I don't want to lose people. So when I create videos, I speak deliberately, not too slow, not too fast, just right. I try to stay in that Goldilocks zone so that people can follow these videos. Travel can be very tiring. Frequently, travel days are very long days, and sometimes we wind up staying up late. And when we find ourselves very tired, very fatigued, and we need to go to bed, we might want to call it a night. That expression means that you are done. You are ready to turn in, you're ready to close out the day and get some rest so that you can start a new day the following day. So today we talked about a lot of expressions in context related to travel. You can probably tell I'm itching to get on the road. That is, I'm ready to take a trip. The only question is where. Now, we live in Northern California. Spring is emerging, and then the question is, do we take a flight overseas? Do we hook up the trailer and pull it on a long vacation, staying in various places, living out of our trailer? Or perhaps we will take a road trip. We like road trips. And for me, a road trip is driving in a car, staying in a hotel, living out of a suitcase, and doing interesting, fun things. I'm in the very early stages of this process. I have made a list. I've made a list of places I might want to go. I call that my wish list. When I use the word wish, I indicate that it doesn't attach any specific plan. It's something I might want to do. When I take a wish and attach a plan to it, I've turned it into a goal. So right now, I am typing my wish list for our travels. It will have the works on it. It'll have everything, except probably will not include Antarctica. After I have a long list of wishes for travel, I'll go through and think about which one has merit and see if we can plan our trip for this spring. And of course, when I take this trip, I'm going to take you along because I'm going to take all this camera gear, and the plan is the trip will include videos uploaded to YouTube. I invite comments below, and if you like videos like this, be sure to click on this one next. See you soon.